channel, not just on the ESPN app, but now, effective, going forward, the ESPN fantasy page on Facebook. All those people, there's like a gazillion people that use Facebook, right, Daniel? Something like that.
Yep, I think it's a gazillion and two.
Gazillion and two.
So if you happen to be a Russian bot, we are available for you.
Wait, Russia loves fantasy football. You didn't know that?
Absolutely.
Russia loves fantasy football.
If you would like to take a break from all the propaganda you're pushing on whatever side of the political divide you are, by all means, come and check us out.
There's got to be some other way that we are streaming. There has to be. There has to be. Like, there's got to be. I'm sure there's like some. There's probably somebody.
When was the last time you were on Facebook?
A couple weeks ago.
Fair enough.
Yeah. How about you? I can't hear Daniel.
Nope, you're good.
Okay, we can hear him now. Anyways, thank you all for joining us. We have a big show today. Obviously, we have double trouble coming up with the Chiefs and the Raiders. We have some week 2 takeaways. We've got some other major news. So everybody survived the weekend, which is good. Matthew survived the week. We think Matthew,
you're back. I mean, that's
to be clear,
right
Matthew and his not child, because Matthew recently appeared on the very popular and excellent Bill Simmons podcast, BS Report.
I committed podultry. Me and
it's
Bill.
always annual tradition. It's very funny.
Yep.
I think you're okay. Bill is always very funny. You're okay.
Fair. I let Bill carry the comedy. Right. Always a lot of fun to talk to Bill. So check that out when you get a chance. And we mostly discuss fantasy football. We also got a chance to talk about some Beverly Hills 90210, which is a passion for both Bill and I.
But Bill made a great point.
Yes.
So Matthew always refers to the fact that he has 5 kids.
Right.
Which is somewhat misleading. Mm-hmm. One of them's 21 years old. Like, you brought your kid to Vegas.
I did.
And so, again, this is a totally Bill's idea, not my own. But
by the way,
you have 4 children.
By the way, I asked Beth if she
kids.
thought that was a good idea. She was concerned.
Yeah, of course she was.
And was she concerned marriage or no?
Well, because listen,
think about it. Because you have Matthew being the chaperone.
Yeah, I'm an idiot.
What could
and my
21-year-old
right, and my 21-year-old kid is an idiot, and he's still my kid. I know what Bill was saying.
It's a term of endearment, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean, obviously, like I love my kids, but my 21-year-old, he needs different sort of care and guidance, but he still needs care and guidance, which is, so I still consider him one of my kids, as opposed to, I understand what Bill was saying, that I have 4 kids and an adult. But whatever, it was his, a couple of weeks ago, he turned 21, and so in exchange for his, his birthday party, for his birthday party, for his birthday present from me, is I took him to Las Vegas for a weekend. So I did an event this weekend at Caesar's Palace. And an amazing event. So many people came out. Tons of fans of the 06010. Great to see everyone. We did Friday night, and then I did a bunch of drafts. People hosted their drafts at the Link, the sports book across from Caesar's Palace on Saturday. And so I was like, I told the people at Caesar's Palace, like, I'm going to bring my kid, my 21-year-old, with him, and he's going to bring a couple of buddies. And I have to tell you, the people at Caesar's Palace are so amazing. They hooked him up.
To be fair.
Huh?
Caesar's Palace, if you like a little respect.
Yeah. Sure. But the entire, unbelievable. I mean, like, so they gave him an unbelievably sick suite. We went to Omnia. I got to give a shout out to Chris Trillo and Russ Finizzi. Russ, I hope I pronounced your last name right. Both fans of the 06010, big fantasy football players. They took such great. Omni was ridiculous, right? Tiesto was there.
Yeah,
and
saw you posting Tiesto. Tell the truth. Did you know who Tiesto was?
Yes,
you were like, before I put this on my Instagram page.
Even I knew who Tiesto was. But anyway,
so great time in Vegas.
They took such great care of us at Omnia. Highly recommended.
So Matthew's 21. The whole thing. Amazing weekend. Matthew, his 21-year-old. When he turns 21, gets a free all-expenses-paid trip to Vegas. You know what my dad gave me when I turned 21?
What's that?
A pat in the back and a wish good luck.
I think that's what I got too. I mean, we did talk about the fact that I was talking with some of the guys at Caesars, and I just said we may have ruined Vegas for him because I mean, like the whole thing was first class and hooked up all the way.
He'll go to a bachelor party. He'll live large. Don't you? I'm not worried about him. I'm just
Vegas,
glad
anyway,
you made it through.
Vegas is great, and I'm just. If you go to Vegas, I cannot recommend the
go find Trillo.
Yeah, exactly at Omnia and Caesar's Palace, and we spent another day at Dre's. A lot of fun. Like the whole thing was just awesome.
It's tough to
awesome.
Matthew.
Oh, and by the way, see Absinthe. That is a fun show.
Rewind. Fantasy news
from the National Football League.
This is the instant replay.
All right, so while Matthew was betting 500 on Red, and Red 16 specifically, the NFL decided on Friday.
Did not get arrested, FYI.
Okay, glad.
Me and none of my kids got arrested. Yeah, it was, listen, a successful weekend all the way around.
It's like the pros do. They put security on you all weekend to make sure that you didn't get into too much trouble.
We had major news on Friday in the NFL, and when you root for a team, typically you root for the players on that team. But there seem to be players that endear themselves to a larger sort of population of football fans. Josh Gordon, to me, has always qualified that. People seem to want to root for Josh Gordon. He's a guy that has certainly had his errors and his misgivings, but he's also shown a lot of resiliency through his NFL career and an incredible talent. On Friday, the NFL decided to conditionally reinstate Josh Gordon, who was suspended on December of 2018. He's back with the Patriots now. Conditionally reinstated means that he can play all 16 games if he is healthy and ready to go. Is he on thin ice? Of course. He's been on thin ice for quite some time. But for now, he has the opportunity to play all 16 games. Upon his reinstatement, the Patriots did place Josh Gordon on the non-football injury list, which means that it is an injury or a condition that is tied to something that did not take place on the football field in a formal setting. It could be something as simple as he was playing catch and pulled up lame running a route. It could be something more grave. For Josh Gordon, our understanding as of this time is it's not more serious. But just to explain how the non-football injury list works, that's the nuts and bolts of it. He can be activated at any day, and he could play as soon as week 1. As a matter of fact, right now, that is the expectation. This is massive news, Matthew Berry. This is a player who, at his best, has been one of the best receivers in football. He is going to be one of the most fascinating players over the next 2.5 weeks before the regular season begins to follow, to project, to draft, to analyze. The Patriots got a major lift here.
100%. So to give you an idea of how major it was, so I got into Vegas Friday about noon.
Okay.
And my event was like at 7:30 Friday night. So me and my son adult.
Your adult, yeah. Your companion.
And his buddies, yeah. Whatever. We went to the Caesars.
Drinking buddy,
we went to the pool at Caesars and just hung out. And so I'm there. I'm like I'm a margarita and a half in or something like that. And all of a sudden, the Josh Gordon news breaks. So I literally had to get out of the pool, sopping wet, and immediately post a video. Which, if you want to see it, you can see on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook at facebook.com/MatthewBerryTMR. But the fact of the matter is that here's what I said. So go ahead.
So let's just reset. And so specific to Josh Gordon, your insight on what this means and how you are approaching drafting him.
Right. So, okay. So, yes, to your point, one of the most fascinating players in the NFL, somebody who has been a fantasy football superstar. But he's also somebody that carries a ton of risk. So think about last year, right? So last year in games in which he got at least 3 targets from Tom Brady. I remember he started a little slow, coming in and then obviously towards the end. But in games in which Josh Gordon got at least 3 targets, which was basically weeks 5 through 14.
Yep.
He averaged 13.5 fantasy points per game, would have been wide receiver 28 on a points per game basis.
Right.
And I think that's about right, Field. Now remember, the Patriots last year, even with Josh Gordon there for the majority of the season, were a run-heavy offense. They were 5th in rush percentage, right? And they don't have, but there are some more targets, obviously, with no Rob Gronkowski coming around. And you think about sort of how the Patriots are coming into the season prior to getting Josh Gordon. It was Julian Edelman and a bunch of guys that like, hi, Mr. Brady, it's nice to meet you. Like,
right.
People that had just shown up. I guess Philip Dorsett's been there for a little bit, but, it was a bunch of new faces. And I think most people felt like it was the weakest receiving core that Brady has had in quite some time.
Fair.
Or at least most inexperienced. So now you bring in Josh Gordon. And I think, listen, I ranked him at wide receiver 28 just sort of as I went through it, because I think that's about right. I mean, again, where he was. Like, so he is like, and I literally said in the video, I said, because you always like to troll me about this, but like all jokes aside, Field Yates, I think he's a wide receiver 3 with upside, right? Because there's risk there, right? So there's obvious risk that comes with Josh Gordon because he is,
you go from available to completely unavailable in one day.
He is on the thinnest of ices,
yeah.
Right? In the NFL, there may not be a player in the NFL that is on thinner ice than Josh Gordon.
That's fair,
right? We also don't know what kind of football shape he's in. I mean, he has been out of football, right, for I guess since December of last year. So maybe he's in football shape, maybe he's not. Also, it's a run heavy. It's a run heavy offense. How long does it get in sync? It doesn't sound like he's going to play until preseason game 4,
if at all.
And Brady's not going to play in that game. So The first time him and Brady, catch passes from each other will be in an NFL game this year. So you don't feel great about starting him in week 1 until you see him, right? And so there's all that risk. On the other hand, it's Josh Gordon getting passes from Tom Brady. So again, I do think I would not want to go into the season with Josh Gordon as my starting wide receiver, as one of my top 2 wide receivers. But the upside and talent is undeniable. And obviously a second year in the system with the trust of Brady and the fact that there are more targets to go around and not a lot of other guys that Brady has any sort of connection with makes this really interesting.
I would just say the thing that you referenced about you don't know how you're going to see him kind of be ramped up in the Patriots offense. If you go back to last year, and granted, he was coming over from Cleveland. He had the hamstring injury there before he ever got to New England, but he had the hamstring injury there after being out of football. And part of what we always talk about is getting acclimated to the sport of football. And the Patriots were very patient last year. If you watched how they brought him into the fold, they were very patient. You guys remember every Sunday we were talking about sort of how much we thought the utilization of Josh Gordon, what it would look like on a week-to-week basis. And granted, there's no Gronk there this year, so it's a little bit different in terms of what the options are. But I still think the Patriots will be patient in how they ramp him up.
So a couple of things to note from last year. Things can change from one season to the next, but in a acquired mid-season acquisition for Josh Gordon, he played in 11 games. In those 11 games, he had a 17.1 target share. However, of the 18 red zone targets during those 11 games, he saw 5 of them. So he had some big play proficiency, certainly a useful player in the Patriots passing game, and the passing games in general spiked last year. Tom Brady threw for more than 250 yards last season on 12 occasions. On 11 of those came in the 11 games that Josh Gordon was on the field. Tom Brady averaged 303 passing yards with Josh Gordon in the mix. He averaged 204 passing yards without Josh Gordon on the field. And that includes a week. Normally we can throw away the Patriots week 17 stats because often they've already clinched a seed. They had to play for something in week 17 last year. I think they drubbed the Jets or somebody. So Josh Gordon was a clear spike to this Patriots offense, which is why I have him as wide receiver 27. And it certainly helps. It doesn't hurt the value of Tom Brady.
Yeah,
either.
I mean, listen, to your point, Field, is that, and we were talking about sort of the fantasy value of Josh Gordon.
Yeah.
But I think you have to absolutely, and I haven't updated my ranks. I was in Vegas this weekend. They'll be updated later today. But Tom Brady, who I had very, very low. You were higher than I, but there's no question this obviously improves the fantasy value of Tom Brady in the games in which Josh Gordon played last year, in which Josh Gordon got at least 3 targets. Tom Brady was quarterback 9 in total points, quarterback 11 over that stretch, again, from weeks 5 to 14. And to your point, with Josh Gordon on the field, Tom Brady averaged 8.2 yards per attempt, 6.9 without him. Makes sense. Yeah. He's a little bit more dink or dunk. Gordon really stretched the field for him. Just in terms of how it compares, it obviously hurts the fantasy value of a couple of the other guys. James White, 26% target share. I'm sorry. James White recorded a catch on 26% of his routes with Gordon off the field, with Gordon on 20%. Okay? Edelman, 25% for both. So one last piece that I think is sort of interesting, Josh Gordon, with Gronk off the field last year,
yep.
Josh Gordon averaged 16.3 air yards per target, way up from 11.5 that he averaged with Gronk on the field. So without Gronk, they were targeting him deeper.
Yeah.
So listen, I think it hurts. I think it hurts James White a little bit, and I think it also makes, other than every non-Julian Edelman Patriots pass catcher undraftable in a standard 10-team ESPN redraft league. Jacoby Myers is a guy that's had a really nice camp and I think is going to make the team. Just to give you a little bit on Jacoby Myers, just for people that are curious, 6'2", 203, not the fastest guy in the world, ran a 4.6 at the combine this year, but still 12 for 151 and 2 touchdowns through 2 preseason games. He has looked impressive.
He has certainly looked impressive. One of the most impressive receivers ever at North Carolina State. They've developed guys like Torrey Holt and Jericho Cotchery and others throughout the years. Corin Robinson never played well in the NFL, but at the time was a blue chip prospect, 7th overall in 2001. One last put the pin in the Josh Gordon conversation.
I would just currently rank the Patriots pass catchers: Edelman, Gordon, N'Keal Harry, Jacoby Myers, Philip Dorsett.
Right. I mean, at that point,
I understand Maurice Harris, whatever.
Fantasy
You go down
irrelevant is what I would
the
say
list,
beyond that.
but just whatever. I mean, I think a lot of people had N'Keal Harry as a breakout, and that may still happen, but I think probably not until the second half of the year. And there's probably other guys that I'm taking flyers on because, again, run-heavy team with Edelman and Gordon. At best, he's the fourth pass-catching option because James White's going to be involved as well.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation now with Josh Gordon. The Patriots offense feels more potent with him. We wish him well. Obviously, this guy has dealt with a lot of things that transcend the football field, and we'll see just how soon he returns to practice. Now, another piece to sort of build off of from the weekend is the Cowboys went to Hawaii to play the Rams. And I express my sincere condolences to all those that were required to go to Hawaii to cover this game, including our own colleague, Mina Kimes. I hope you endured the trek out there to Honolulu.
Yeah.
By the way, just congrats to Mina Kimes. It was awesome.
Yeah,
listening
very
to her
cool
on
to
the
see Mina
broadcast.
part of the
It was
Rams broadcast
she
team.
was phenomenal.
She did great.
As expected.
Which is completely expected
Right.
because she's awesome.
But in the latest, where is Ezekiel Elliott? Because he's not in Hawaii.
But he's back in
has
Dallas.
reportedly returned from Cabo to Dallas.
Yep.
This is a far trip, and
Right.
it may mean something. It may mean nothing. There's a lot of smoke that this is trending towards Ezekiel Elliott's getting a deal done before the regular season. But in the meantime, Matthew, Tony Pollard caught your eye over the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, just really impressive. So, I mean, look, so far in this preseason, 9 for 58, had a 14-yard touchdown run against the Rams over the weekend. Really impressive. In fact, he was in for that entire first drive with the starters and looked great. Looked like the guy, to the point that after the game, Jerry Jones was asked about Tony Pollard, and he was like, Zeke who? You know what I mean? They asked him about Zeke and Tony Pollard, and he was just like, Zeke who? And then he's just like, he walked it back a little bit and joking a little bit. And he just said, no, we think Tony's going to be involved. He's going to be, special and be helpful along with the stuff that we have planned for Zeke. So a little bit on Tony Pollard here. 6 foot, 215 out of Memphis there. Had some nice work in Memphis as well. Backed up Darryl Henderson, who, I know everyone's excited about for the Rams as well, speaking of the Rams. But so a friend of mine, Curtis Patrick, does a great job on Twitter at @CPatrickNFL, tweeted out the following, and I thought this was pretty good. Since the year 2000, only 2 players in college football amassed the following production profile: 100 career rushing attempts, 100 career receptions, 7 kick return touchdowns. And that list is C.J. Spiller and Tony Pollard, right? He is the only player in college football since 2000 to compile 100 career rushing attempts, 100 career receptions, and a career average of over 30 yards per kick return. Again, he's a big play guy. And then one last stat that Curtis threw out there. Since 2000, only 26 college football players posted a season of at least 400 rushing yards, 400 receiving yards, 400 kick return yards. And among others, that list includes Christian McCaffrey, Chris Johnson, C.J. Spiller, Randall Cobb, Reggie Bush, Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, and Tony Pollard.
Not sure I'm really ready to crown Saquon. It's only been one season, but I get your point.
Right. Listen, and there's some cherry-picked names in there, right? Okay, but...
No, I know. But it's good company to be in.
Listen, it's good company to be in. Again, so anyway, Curtis does follow Curtis on Twitter at CPatrickNFL. He runs RotoViz, which I think is a really good site as well. They're part of the RotoPass package, just full disclosure there. But anyway, just really interesting stuff, I think, there in terms of Tony Pollard and somebody that needs to be on your radar. Like, I actually think Tony Pollard needs to be drafted in 100% of leagues. And I will tell you why. Because Ezekiel Elliott's going to be drafted in 100% of leagues. And all Alfred Morris jokes aside, if Zeke doesn't play, I think Tony Pollard is going to be the starting running back of the NFL. Is he built to handle the kind of workload that Zeke has? I don't know. You know what I mean?
You guys are.
Committee,
not sure
but right.
Anybody
I don't
is.
know, but he would be the starting running back on one of the better offenses of the NFL and one of the more run-heavy offenses of the NFL. If you draft Zeke, you must draft Tony Pollard. Like I said, I did that event in Vegas this weekend, and I participated in 10 different drafts. Like, we had a whole draft party. Yep. And Tony Pollard went in all of them.
So the takeaway here, just to sort of close it all out, is that when we did our Double Trouble show, the third day of the podcast reopening season, we did not yet have a great feel for who the Cowboys' clear-cut backup running back would be. You are now at the point where you feel comfortable with it being Tony Pollard.
I mean, we talked about Tony Pollard in that show, but you're right. We weren't sure.
We were not quite there yet. So Tony Pollard has emerged as the back that you would most want to roster if you do use an early pick on Ezekiel Elliott.
Am I alone in that? You guys agree with that? Disagree?
Yeah, I like it. Okay. I agree with you. And he looked good yesterday.
Yeah, getting closer for sure.
Proving his case.
Yep. Everybody looks good in Hawaii, though. Let's be honest. Everybody looks really good. Good job.
You haven't seen me in Hawaii without my shirt on.
That's a good point. Stephania, please tell us about ZipRecruiter if you'd be so kind.
I will, Field. Hiring used to be hard. Multiple job sites, stacks of resumes, a confusing review process. But today, hiring can be easy, and you only have to go to one place to get it done, ZipRecruiter.com/06010. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. With their powerful matching technology, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invites them to apply to your job. As applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one and spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. ZipRecruiter is so effective that 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. Right now, our listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/06010. That's ZipRecruiter.com/06010, ZipRecruiter.com/06010. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble. Double trouble.
As of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
Absolutely jam-packed double trouble for you today because two of the most intriguing teams in very different ways for fantasy football this season. Let's begin with our king, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs have a 10.5 win projection this year, according to Matthew's friends in Vegas. They are seeking a franchise best 5 straight 10-plus win seasons. So let's begin here with Patrick Mahomes. We don't need to bore you with where we have him ranked. You know where we have him ranked. Number 1 amongst quarterbacks. But where it does get interesting is draft strategy. That is the only question, really, as it pertains to Patrick Mahomes. And there may not be a perfect way to frame it because obviously different size leagues and different scoring systems and different people that you play with can all impact this. So let's do our best to speak generally. Speaking generally, Matthew Berry, what is the earliest that you would entertain drafting Patrick Mahomes? Because his current ADP is 17th. That's a late second round pick, and that feels very early.
Yeah, I mean, I have him at 29 overall. So I have him as a late third rounder.
Okay.
But again, I think to your point, it depends on league size and what your roster is. So one of the drafts I did in Vegas, so long story, but like Friday night from the event, I said like, hey, if people come to the thing tomorrow, I got asked and I said, sure, I'll play in a league with you. And so we set up a bunch of different leagues of people that were at the event Friday night that came to the event on Saturday, and we all just drafted together. And so it was a lot of fun. But one of the leagues was like just wound up being an 8-team league.
Yep.
And so we made it a super flex league. Right? And so in an 8-team super flex league, and I had pick 8, I was like, I went Mahomes. In the first round, again, it's
That's different.
right?
Again,
Because it's a shallow league, so I was worried about running back any of the other positions.
It's the Adam Schefters.
That's right.
So sort of speaking generally for
a super flex league, so it's a 2-quarterback, right?
All right,
in essence,
so
a 2-quarterback league.
If you were to play in just a standard 10-team league where you're starting one quarterback and he is awarded for late third, so your answer is
that's
late
why
third.
I have him at the 29th. So late third, early fourth, depending on sort of how you have it, how the draft is going for you, because. The thing is that I know a lot of people want to scream regression about Patrick Mahomes, and maybe he regresses. Like, there's certainly a chance. It's more likely than not he regresses, right?
Yep.
I mean, we've looked at it, and we've looked at sort of all the players that have had those kind of seasons, those 50 touchdown type seasons, right? Whether it's Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, and you go there. But again, those players. If you take the percentage that they regress, you took the average of all those players that have had 40 or more touchdown passes, and you took the average of it and of what they regressed, and you put that to Patrick Mahomes, he still would have finished as the number 1 quarterback in fantasy last year, right? Again, take 15 touchdown passes away from him. Take 950 passing yards and 6 touchdown passes. Take 1,000 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown away. Take 62 fantasy points away. All those things, he still would have been the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. The idea being basically, Field, that Patrick Mahomes can regress a significant amount and still be the number one quarterback in fantasy.
Now,
there's also the argument that he's just special. He's an outlier.
Sure, right. That's the thing, is that I still think he has to be an outlier to justify a pick that early, because just finishing quarterback 1 is not enough to merit a super premium on drafting a quarterback before any other, if that makes sense, right? So let's say again, I'm not counting on this, but in the event that Patrick Mahomes regresses to some of those barriers that you mentioned, like, he goes from 50 to 37 touchdown passes and he finishes 20 points ahead of Deshaun Watson, well, then drafting him 2 or 2.5 rounds sooner than Deshaun Watson is not necessarily great return on investment. It's not that he has to be special. It's that he has to be special relative to every other quarterback. Because you're right. I am thinking there is a chance that, I think there's a chance that he has a similar season to last year, 45 touchdowns.
Right.
And assuming every other quarterback does not reach that threshold, then I'm with you in that third round investment. Now, again, that's the risk you take, right? Like, if you're willing to take him at 28 and he yields that, then it's great. But if, he's closer to where every other quarterback is, then hindsight will tell you that was a risk, not a risky, but it was a less than worthwhile investment, because you'll probably have somebody like, again, just making this up here, Carson Wentz go in round 8.
Sure.
Who will be close to what Patrick Mahomes
Yeah, I mean,
is.
I think that point is well taken, and I think it makes a ton of sense, right? Which is that you're banking on him not only being the number one quarterback in fantasy, but number one by a decent margin, which is what he was last year. The fact is that he's going as 16th.
Yep.
Because you're not going to get him, right? Just understand that if you want Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have to reach for him. And it's one of those things, and I wrote about this in the manifesto, that you're either drinking the Kool-Aid or you're not. Right. Like, we can talk about all the stats and regression. Like, it's positive that pretty much the entire offense is back, with the exception of running back, and we'll talk about that in a second. But, it's another year in Andy Reid's system, and we don't think the defense is going to be that much better than it was last year. So there should be some more shootouts for Patrick Mahomes. But yeah, like, you're either drinking the Kool-Aid or you're not on him.
Fair.
And I believe in every league there's at least one person that will drink the Kool-Aid. So I would be surprised if he gets out of the second round in any normal league.
The other thing I'd say about it is that I feel like he's safe, right? He's borderline fail-proof. So, like, you will not lose your league because you draft Patrick Mahomes super early. You just may not win your league by drafting Patrick Mahomes super early, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's get to his pass catchers. Because,
and by the way, and just one last piece of comparison here. So I have Mahomes at 29. Here, the people I have around him: Adam Thielen, Chris Carson, Zach Ertz, T.Y. Hilton, Amari Cooper, Devontae Freeman. I mean, like, all those guys have somewhat question marks to them, right?
Yeah, no question.
You could argue Hilton's a little bit safer, but we don't know about Andrew Luck's health. Ertz and, Carson's a little injury prone, even though I love him. So it's just, you start getting into those question marks.
Let's keep spinning things forward with pass catchers, and it's a pretty cut and dry group because they're all very, very good. Tyreke Hill, who, again, has been not at all punished by the NFL. No suspension, no fine. The NFL has said if they find more evidence or anything else pertaining to the off the field matter he dealt with this offseason involving his young son, they will reinvestigate this, or they will look into this further. But as of right now, Tyreke Hill is scheduled to play 16 games this season. We have him at wide receiver 6 for me. Matthew has him at wide receiver 7. His ADP amongst wide receivers is 6th. Frankly, that's far lower than where he was last year when he was the number 1 scoring player amongst wide receivers in fantasy. Matthew, can we expect there's really, you want to make the case for Tyreke Hill number 1 as a wide receiver? Like, you can make it. There's really no need to argue that one.
He was the number 1 wide receiver last year.
Literally,
asked and answered. I guess the reason I have him, and when I say low, I have him at wide receiver 7, I guess is a little bit of the inconsistency, right? So 5 different weeks last year, he finished as the 3rd best wide receiver in fantasy or better. And he had 4 different weeks, actually, where he was the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy for the week. He also had 4 weeks where he was outside the top 40 of wide receivers. So there's a little bit more, especially because he's such a deep ball player, there's a little bit more variance there than somebody like a Michael Thomas or a Julio Jones or Hopkins or Adams, Juju, all of whom I have higher than him. I also have Beckham as well, where I think there's more of a floor. There may not be a player that has as high a ceiling as Tyreke Hill, especially given, not only his skill set, but the skill set of that offense and Patrick Mahomes' arm. But But yeah, because of that, a little bit of inconsistency there. That's why I have him at 7.
A teeny tiny bit. Just to further that point, Matthew, is he caught 59.6% of his targets. Last year, Michael Thomas had like a record-setting season, like 85 or 88% of his targets he caught. So just you throw the football down the field further, it's a less likely to land in the receiver's hands. It's just a more risky proposition. But you want to take Tyreke Hill as the back end of the first round, I think that's going to be something most people will understand.
We all believe that it would appear, and I'll ask you to put on your NFL insider hat for 1 minute. Obviously, there's things we may not know, but it would appear that the investigation seems to be over, and that if there's any drama for Tyreke Hill, it would be new drama. We don't feel like that.
I'm not as comfortable saying that, only because the NFL left the door open at the end of their statement saying if new information comes to light.
Sure.
But for right now, he is in line to play 16 games this season.
Right.
Sammy Watkins was the number 2 wide receiver in Kansas City last year.
So there is a little bit of risk with Tyreke Hill.
Yep.
All right, go ahead.
You can't quantify it, though. It's just hard to,
No,
that's out of all of our
again, without any
purview.
judgment on the player or the person, just in general to that case, it does feel like they investigated for a long time.
They did, and we'll see whether anything goes on from there. Sammy Watkins, the Chiefs' number 2 wide receiver. I've got him at wide receiver 36. Matthew has him at wide receiver 30. Stephania, it just feels like every year part of the concern that people are going to have with Sammy Watkins is that injury-prone, brittle, whatever you want to call him, he's missed a lot of time in his young NFL career.
He has, and I think that some of that has to be sort of baked into how you value Sammy Watkins. You just sort of expect that there's going to be missed time. If you go back, 2014 played in all 16 games, then it was 13, 8, 15, and 10. Last year, people may not remember, he had a right foot injury that kept him out for the final games of the season. And I look at now, so his ADP right now is 29. Last year, he finished wide receiver 38 on a point per game basis. I figure you bake in some missed time. It basically accounts for the value, as I said, maybe 10 to 12 games at around 14 points per game if you're hopeful. But keep in mind, only 1 end zone target last year, too. So I think the volume is sort of intermediate worth when you come to Sammy Watkins, and that's about what you're getting.
Normally when a team makes a major investment, and 3 years and $48 million is a major investment in a player, they try to justify it, right? Like you see a team go out of its way to like, hey, we paid all this money to Le'Veon Bell, we better start using him a bunch, right? The Chiefs and Sammy Watkins, not only do they not have to, like it actually might be less beneficial for their offense to force the football to Sammy Watkins because he's clearly the 3rd best pass catcher on this team.
It actually feels like a really good fit. Like I feel, Sammy Watkins after he left Buffalo and then, he bounced around a bit. And then when he got to Kansas City, it just felt like it sort of works for them.
Sure. Yeah. But it just like, I think the thing with Sammy Watkins is like in earlier stages of his career, he had not Deshaun Jackson like yo-yo-ness to him, but really good big play threat. Well, in Kansas City, he's not. As a matter of fact, it was reflected last year. His air yards per target last year was 8.4. It's 43% his career average. He was much more of a short to intermediate passing game threat than he was a deep threat, Matthew. And, rosterable, unquestioned, no question about that. But going into week 1, it's not like I say to myself, hey, you know what? Sammy Watkins is a fixture for me, guaranteed, no ifs, ands, or buts.
No, but I think there's significant upside. I mean, so I have him ranked. I mean, you and I both have him ranked as a wide receiver 4.
Yep.
Right, and I think that's right. I mean, so there's significant upside there. Like had double-digit fantasy points in the majority of his games last year for his career. When his last, I should say, not just for his career, but if you look at his last 16 games where he's gotten at least 7 targets, 86 catches, over 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns, would have been 311 fantasy points. Would have been the 7th best wide receiver in fantasy last year. Now, that's over a number of years, obviously, but the point being that, like, when he's the guy and getting, he can put up big fantasy points. But yes, with Tyreke Hill stretching the field, Watkins is playing underneath more, which may help. I mean, last year caught a career-high 72% of his targets, which, I mean, so I think he's more valuable in PPR than he is in standard. And to Stephania's point, like they're not looking at him when they get to the end zone. I mean, it's when they get in close. But if something were to happen to Tyreke Hill, obviously he would just be, he'd be clearly a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. And I think just being in that offense, he was the 4th option last year. And again, still was a wide receiver 4.
Yeah,
on a
wide receiver
points per
4
game
last year on a
basis.
points
So I
per
think
game
that's
basis for Sammy Watkins. One more name to note amongst these wide receivers is Mecole Hardman, second-round pick out of Georgia. Now, remember, when the draft took place, the Chiefs were certainly very concerned about the availability for Tyreke Hill. That disturbing audio was released about an hour before the first round of the NFL draft. So I don't know how much of that influenced the Mecole Hardman pick. The guy can absolutely fly. He is an incredible speedster out of Georgia. I don't know that there's necessarily, you don't necessarily back up every top-tier wide receiver. Hill, whether it's your concerns about any sort of injury or any sort of off-field stuff, I think that the player that you would feel most comfortable rostering behind him would be Mecole Hardman. Certainly a name to keep in mind. The Fantasy Focus Football Podcast is sponsored by ADT. What does real protection mean for our listeners? You can get all of the latest innovation in smart home security from ADT combined with 24/7 monitoring for the most trusted name in home security. You got a team of professionals designing and installing a secure smart home just for you. You get 18,000 employees safeguarding. 18,000 with connection to first responders. You get the nation's #1 smart home security provider. You can get a secure smart home with everything from video doorbells, indoor and outdoor cameras, smart locks and lights, all of that controlled from the ADT app or the sound of your voice. You can get professionally monitored carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. You can get a system custom designed to fit your home. You can get safety on the go, in the car, or when the kids are at school with the all 4 of Matthew's children, all 4 of them, with the ADT Go app with an SOS button. Shout out to our friends at ADT. Next up for the Chiefs is Damian Williams, a player that at one point this offseason I felt strongly enough that I named him my breakout candidate of the year. He took over last year once Kareem Hunt was waived by the Chiefs. He played very well from them. There's been all this sort of rumblings about a potential work split in Kansas City. And part of it, Stephania, is because he was dealing with at the outset of training camp. Is nagging the proper way to put this injury?
His hamstring is sort of lingering around. But, it was interesting because it was Rick Burkholder, who is the head athletic trainer for the Kansas City Chiefs, that said, these are the things that are present in the early part of training camp. And a lot of it is just getting acclimated to football, dehydration, et cetera. It didn't sound like they were overly concerned. And I think to your point, Damian Williams showed what he could do when he was given the opportunity. Interesting stat for you about him. This comes from Warren Sharp. Sharp's football analysis obviously does a great job. If you're looking at Mahomes to Williams connection, there's an opportunity here because Patrick Mahomes last year led the league in first down passes to running backs, 69% success rate, 10.1 yards per attempt. Damian Williams is a decent pass catcher. So and Kansas City, if they are going to pass on first down a fair amount, that's just more fantasy value for Damian Williams relative to other pass catching running backs.
So, Matthew, he is a player that right now is being drafted 21st amongst running backs and falling. I've got him running back 17. You remain resolute at running back 12. I actually think that you have it right over the ADP here. You have noted that traditionally Andy Reid's MO has been one back and one back only that carries most of the load.
Yeah, that's correct. And, I mean, honestly, he played the majority of the first-team offense. He played the majority of the first series with the first-team offense, and then Mahomes was still in the second series, and Hyde came in, and there was some Darwin Thompson. We'll talk about those guys. But Damian Williams played the majority. He played the entire first series. He's always been a running back he's always been a pick one guy coach, Andy Reid. He's never really done much of a running back by committee. And again, I know there are people that don't think Damian Williams is that talented of a running back here. I actually think I think there's not enough sample size yet. He didn't play. He played sparingly at Miami, right? And then we saw him as the guy for a short time in Kansas City last year where he excelled.
Yeah.
But regardless, even if you think Damian Williams is just a guy, trust in the Andy Reid starting running back. Since he took over in Kansas City in 2013, the Kansas City running back ranks whoever the Kansas City starting running back is, right? They're third in yards per carry, fourth in rushing touchdowns. They're sixth in yards before first contact. He's great at getting running backs into space and freeing them up. I mean, here's a guy that, in Damian Williams, in this system, in games in which he got 10 or more touches, including the playoffs last year, 24.4 fantasy points per game last year. Only Todd Gurley averaged more points than that among running backs during the regular season. So, I don't know. I mean, He's the starting running back on one of the best offenses in football. Rising tides float all boats. Like Patrick Mahomes, like we can all agree, right? Kansas City's going to have a very good offense. That we think Mahomes is really great. So the only argument against Damian Williams is, oh well, it might be a committee. We don't think it's a committee, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, basically, if you think he's the man, then having him as a top 15 running back play is the only way that you can answer right now in terms of his value for Damian Williams. I tend to think he is going to be the man. I have just hedged a little bit at having him at running back 17. But if it's not Damian Williams,
but in your hedge is what? It's based on production,
it's based off of the fact that he's more journeyman than he is. Like, right? I don't even know if Kansas City saw that much in Damian Williams until they actually had to use him as a starting running back. Right? They were stumbling into. They had no choice at week 15 of last year.
But let's play that out for one more second because I've heard that argument. Let's say he is more journeyman than star running back.
Yep.
What are their options at the moment, right? Because they don't have a lot behind it. Right. So is your belief that they would go to a running back by committee? If that turns out to be the case.
Yes, because my thinking is that if it's not Damian Williams as a one-man band, it's a total workload split amongst Chiefs running backs. And that includes the likes of Carlos Hyde, the veteran presence, Darwin Thompson, a 6th-round pick this year. So does anybody amongst that group, also Darrell Williams on the roster, anybody in that group merit a roster spot right now, Matthew? I would contend no.
See, I think Darwin Thompson, 10-team league, it's a little bit tough, but like a 12-team league, I think he's worth a flyer. I have him in a couple of deeper leagues that have done. I think he's an interesting best ball guy to grab. So listen, he has looked good. He has looked good in the preseason. Andy Reid said of him, quote, he's got good vision in the run game, and then he's got a pretty good understanding of the passing game. Andy Reid basically talked about how Darwin Thompson more advanced than they thought he would be when they drafted him. He's a 6th-round pick out of Utah State. But the fact here is that Darwin Thompson, like if you just watch, like he is a big play waiting to happen. He is explosive. He's a smaller guy, but he is tough. Like they ran him between the tackles sometimes. I mean, I don't know. I just think he's a very interesting name for deeper leagues and for 10-team standard leagues just to file away, just to be aware of it, and we'll see what happens next week with the third preseason game. But I am fully in. I am pot committed to Damian Williams being the guy in Kansas City and being a superstar running back and a bargain at his current ADP of running back 21.
I like it. There may not be anything as close to a sure thing in fantasy football as you'd like it to be, but I think the surest thing in fantasy football this season is Travis Kelce. He plays a position where there are very few star players. He plays it very well. His role has not necessarily changed over the course of his career. It's only gotten bigger and better. Travis Kelce led the NFL with 15 games, 5+ catches last season. He is the consensus tight end one this year. I think he's the safest player in fantasy football, Matthew.
I completely
at least
agree.
In the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, like, look at this. Like, so 800 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns in all 5 of his NFL seasons. No other tight end has such a streak over the past 15 years. So second most catches inside the opponent's 30-yard line this season, right? Only Michael Thomas had more last year. So it really comes down to where do you want to take a tight end? We all agree he's the number one tight end. It's not close. He's got, a super high floor, over 100 catches last year.
Part of the reason he could put up those numbers, he's only missed 1 game in the last 5 seasons.
Yeah.
I mean,
After
it's
that
incredible.
knee injury to begin his career, which cost him basically all of his rookie season, Travis Kelce has been a force. His 26.2% target share last year was the most by a tight end since Tony Gonzalez in 2008.
He's
6th
good.
most red zone targets in the NFL last year, 12 end zone targets, tied with Tyreke Hill for the best in the NFL. If I say safe and it bothers people, call it most reliable, call it most consistent, whatever you want. I'm in on Travis Kelce. If you take him in the back end of the first round, I respect you. I applaud you.
Yeah, like no issue with that. I am at 14 overall. That's actually where he's going on ESPN.com. He's going at 14 overall, so he's the middle of the second round. So anywhere between sort of the end of the first to the middle of the second, or obviously later, I'm good with. It just depends on sort of draft strategy and whether you want to do it. I will say that if you end up not drafting Kelce, and I'm okay with it because, again, we've talked about the Ingrams and the Howards and the Hunter Henrys, and, I love Vance McDonald this year. I'm okay waiting on tight end. So it just sort of depends on your status there. I will say that if you don't draft Travis Kelce, I don't love where Kittle and Ertz are going in their ADP. So if you want to have one of the big three, to me, Kelce's the tight end to target.
Let's take a quick break and come back and talk about the Raiders.
Fantasy, you're in the 06010. Focus. Fantasy, focus.
We're back. Let's talk about the Raiders, who soon will live in Vegas. That's right. They will soon be the Las Vegas Raiders. Vegas has them for just 6 wins. This is
so
the last
fitting.
year that Vegas can get away with these
so
6
fitting.
wins nonsense. All right, starting next year, Vegas will project the Raiders for 14 wins minimum every single year. Let's begin with their quarterback, and we can probably make this
By the way,
fairly quick.
if anyone from the Raiders is listening and wants some tips when they move to Vegas, let me know.
I'm sure,
I got
that's
some
what they would
hookups.
love is that for their folks to get tips on where to go out. They actually want them to
I got some hookups
focus
at
on
Omnia.
football.
I got some hookups at Caesar's Palace. I got some places they could go.
Derek Carr is not being drafted as a startable quarterback. He's being drafted 22nd overall amongst QBs. I've got him 21st. Matthew, you've got him at 23. How would you paint the quick case for Derek Carr to be a useful fantasy quarterback this year?
Antonio Brown plays, and the additions of Antonio Brown, Tyrell Williams, Josh Jacobs in the backfield, my boy Darren Waller getting some love. That all those things add to fantasy success. That you think about offensive coordinator Greg Olson there, who made Blake Bortles a top 12 fantasy quarterback, for a few years there in Jacksonville, and then was part of the first season that Jared Goff. He was the quarterback's coach in Los Angeles when Jared Goff had his first big year under McVay. So he came over to L.A. with McVay to be the quarterback's coach, and then John Gruden hired him to be the offense coordinator. So the argument for him is that the upgrade in talent, and because there's an upgrade in talent, they become more pass-heavy and more fantasy-friendly. Having said that, he doesn't add a lot with his legs. I'm outside the top 20. But you asked me to make the case for him.
Right,
The case is
everything clicks.
And their defense is bad, so it's a lot of junk time. And then he's just got to chuck it. I mean, I think people forget this is a team that threw a ton last year.
They certainly did throw the football, but let's get to the guys that matter more this year, which is the pass catchers. Let's begin with the saga that seemingly will not end. Yesterday around 5:30, GM Mike Mayock issued a statement in regards to wide receiver Antonio Brown. Basically an ultimatum from him. Hey, he has left training camp, and we're at the point where you got to make a decision, Antonio. You're either all the way in or you're all the way out. As of right now, Antonio Brown has not found a helmet that satisfies his desires. His feet are not yet healthy enough to be removed from the non-football injury list. Stephania, let's begin there. Just from a foot perspective, do we expect Antonio Brown to be on the field in week 1?
Well, his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, was asked this very question on Get Up this morning, and his response specific to Antonio Brown's feet was that he was not quite there yet, but that he was improving, and that his hope was that he would be ready to go by week 1. In fact, he said he thought that he would be ready to go by week 1. It almost seems like the feet are the secondary issue because the helmet is certainly taking up much of the focus. But to be honest, if he's not out there testing it, or working with the staff, like, how do we know? We're just going off of this report from his agent. So I think everyone would.
But
like
I'm sure
to
his
see.
agent would be 100% honest, right?
Look, I have the feeling just from the full discussion that happened on the show this morning that everything is pointing to Antonio Brown being there and being ready to play by week 1, no matter what ups and downs happen between now and then. But what I would say is, you guys know I always talk about this adaptability to football when you haven't played in a long time, you haven't done anything. Obviously, Antonio Brown works out, keeps himself in amazing shape, but he hasn't been able to do exactly that if the feet have been a problem. So if you all of a sudden are playing 4 quarters of football and sprinting up and down the field and stopping and starting, it's the acceleration, deceleration, pivoting, planting. Those are the things that bother his feet. If you haven't been doing that and all of a sudden you're doing it for 4 quarters, is that going to present a problem for you? I think there's a little bit of a reason to be worried about that.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, Field. We talked about this on the marathon quite a bit. He was kind of the dominating storyline because the helmet thing had just happened. But my big take on Antonio Brown this year is that there's risk, whereas there used to be none. This is a guy who the past 6 seasons was drafted as the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy.
Yep.
And finished there, except for last year, I guess he was number 2 on a points per game basis, I believe.
Very close. The point is,
the point is that
star last year.
For the last 6 years, Antonio Brown has been like Travis Kelce, money in the bank when it comes to fantasy football. Just somebody that you could write in, set it and forget it and never worry about it. There was just no risk with him. And now all of a sudden, there's risk, right? There's risk with the feet. There's risk with the helmet thing. Shout out to Adam Schefter, by the way, who during the marathon said more than once on our air saying, because during the marathon, AB had released that Instagram photo saying, sorry, I lost the arbitration, but, onward and I'll be there, no big deal. And, Schefter was like, I don't think we've heard the last of this helmet issue. And what do you know? Yesterday, we haven't heard the last of this helmet issue. And Drew Rosenhaus is out there trying to do damage control. And so, look, we know he's an insanely talented player. We know that whenever he's on the field, he's going to get a massive target share. But from Big Ben to Derek Carr is a downgrade, right? He hasn't had nearly as much time to connect with Derek Carr this offseason. And obviously, you've got years and years of connection between Ben and AB. So I have Antonio Brown, I believe, as wide receiver 7. No, I take that back. I think I'm at 9. Yes, I'm at wide receiver 9, Field. You have him at 10. He's currently going at wide receiver 8. So we all have him in basically the same range, which is as a lower end wide receiver 1. But the point is, there is risk with Antonio Brown where there never was before. He's currently going just ahead of Mike Evans. In my own personal ranks, I have Mike Evans just 1 spot ahead of Antonio Brown. I think believe it or not, I think there's less risk with Mike Evans.
No question about that. And there's also, so let's just say Antonio Brown either is hampered by the feet or is not actually there in week 1. Tyrell Williams / other Raiders wide receivers becomes sort of interesting. So I guess my question is this. In the event that there's some sort of Antonio Brown absence, how much value does Tyrell Williams carry? And are you drafting him merely for the protection, or are you drafting him because you think there's a way that both he and Antonio Brown, when on the field together, are actually both pretty productive?
I think it's somewhere in the middle there, right? Certainly there is significant upside, right? He's had 8 different games. Remember Tyrell Williams came on and the Chargers, obviously Keenan Allen commands a tremendous target share when he was there, but there's only 8 career games in which Tyrell Williams got at least 8 or more targets. And in those eight games, 45 catches, 599 yards, 3 touchdowns, 15.4 fantasy points per game.
Yeah.
Over a full season, that's wide receiver 13, just ahead of Brandon Cooks, just between Cooks and Keenan Allen there. So Tyrell Williams, who's a talented player when he's gotten a shot, yes, I think he would, be a top 20 wide receiver if Antonio Brown were to miss any time. We just don't know yet, Field, if the Raiders can support 2 fantasy-relevant wide receivers, especially given the depth of the position.
We'll learn a lot about Tyrell Williams this year as well, just because forever he was a backup, essentially, or at least a non-full-time player in Los Angeles and San Diego, and he's such a vertical threat. That was kind of what he was used as almost exclusively in Los Angeles.
Yep.
Maybe they try to diversify his game a little bit with the Raiders. Also, Hunter Renfrow on the radar. I just say this, Hunter Renfrow has been having a killer camp for the Raiders. Don't know that there's value in not in a 10-team league right now, but in the 16-team league, late end of the draft.
14 deeper PPR league.
Yeah.
Just a name to keep in mind. Just, last year, Derek Carr's actually been pretty good. He's been better in terms of passer rating to the slot than he is to the non-slot. So we expect Hunter Renfrow to be the starting slot receiver for the Oakland Raiders, and there's a reason they drafted him. Like he's the kind of kid that doesn't look like a football player, which he jokes about, but super reliable. And it's interesting. I interviewed Antonio Brown in Las Vegas a couple of months ago at the NFLPA event that I went to. And I asked Antonio Brown, I said, just give me a sleeper on your team. Who's impressing you in practice? And he's like, Hunter Renfrow. And same thing, interviewed Josh Jacobs at the FSGA conference in New York a month ago. And I said, give me a sleeper on your team. Just why? That was the question. Give me a sleeper on your team. Hunter Renfrow. So interesting, right? I mean, he's, if nothing else, we've heard, great quotes from the coaches, but also his fellow players are noticing him.
Interesting. Yep, he is certainly on the radar. And you can also learn more about him on HBO's Hard Knocks, Matthew.
HBO Sports, NFL Films, and the Oakland Raiders have teamed up for an unfiltered, all-access look at what it takes to make it in the National Football League. It's Hard Knocks training camp with the Oakland Raiders. The new season of the groundbreaking sports reality series Field spotlights the historic AFC West franchise that has an intriguing mix of established veterans, highly regarded rookie hopefuls, and free agent acquisitions under head coach John Gruden. Don't miss Hard Knocks training camp with the Oakland Raiders. New episodes Tuesdays at 10 p.m. only on HBO.
Let's get to a couple of players that Matthew likes very much, and we begin with Matthew's fantasy ride or die, Mr. Josh Jacobs. We've talked about him a lot, Matthew, so you can empty the vault one more time
guy.
and tell him why he is your ride or die.
I love me some Josh Jacobs. Look, sometimes there's a danger in interviewing players and getting to know them, right? I mean, because you just don't know. Sometimes you like a player and and that colors your opinion of them.
Sure,
There have been players that I've interviewed that I haven't thought were great guys, and then they still are good.
I know. You were the first person to call Tom Brady a jerk. I don't get it. I don't know why, but seemed like that one worked out for you, huh?
Yeah. No, but there are players, whatever. I'm not going to, but I will tell you that I love this kid. And it's not just he's an easy kid to root for if you find out his story and everything that he's gone through. But more importantly, the talent is obvious. You watch the tape, he just pops off at 5.9 yards per carry during his career at Alabama. He's a guy that caught a ton of balls as well. Look, I know he split time with Damian Harris, but there's two ways to go about that. Either he's not a workhorse back or, hey, he's fresh. There's a lot of tread left on the tires. He was the first-round pick, not only of the Oakland Raiders, but the first running back off the board in last year's NFL draft. And you sort of look at the history of first-round running backs drafted in the first round, and they tend to do pretty well in fantasy. And part of it is because they get so much volume, which is one of the arguments for Josh Jacobs, right? John Gruden's had 12 years as a head coach in the NFL. His number one running back has averaged 257 touches. He's just gotten a ton of work. They're going to use him in the passing game. He's a pretty good pass catcher. So Josh told me during the interview that, like, in practice, they've been lining up in the slot. They line him up outside. Like, they're doing different things to keep him on the field all three downs and have him involved in the passing game. And the last thing I think is super interesting is that when he was a senior in high school, Josh Jacobs played quarterback. Now, it was Wildcat.
I love this story.
He played Wildcat. It was Wildcat quarterback, but still, and I when I interviewed him, I said, like, whoa, we got to tell Coach Gruden about this. And he's like, oh, Josh Jacobs was like, we already have the package installed. Like, so, I mean, I think you'll see him throwing some passes this year. Now, maybe, is it 5? Is it 2? I don't, is it 10? We'll find out. But in a lost season last year for the Raiders, they were still 6th in red zone rush percentage. They ran when they got in close. I think this is a special player who's going to get massive opportunity. We've seen it in the last couple of years with rookies, whether it was Kareem Hunt, whether it was Saquon Barkley last year, whether it was, you think about, Ezekiel Elliott's rookie year, Alvin Kamara's rookie year, David Johnson's rookie year. Like, rookie running backs, more often than not, have had a fantasy impact, a positive one. Josh Jacobs, my fantasy ride or die this year.
Just hope he stays on the field for every down. The only way that he would not would be if on third down they gave some run to Jalen Richard, who does things in the passing game very well. He had a 15.2% target share last year. Now, they were terrible, playing from behind all the time. Won't be the same this year. But he also caught, of his 81 targets, he had 0 drops. Now, there were some off-target throws, etc. But when the ball was in the catch radius of Jalen Richard, he is going to be money in the bank.
Best yards per carry of the 3 running backs that they had last year.
Not a great running game, but at least he did find a way to semi-stand out. Matthew, it's like the Raiders have elicited this, like, you're in. You're basically a Redskins fan who likes the Raiders more this year. Darren Waller.
You gotta have a backup plan.
Tight end 26 in terms of ADP. I've got him at tight end 23. You've got him all the way up at tight end 15. You're in on Darren Waller.
I'm super in on Darren Waller, and at tight end 15, I may not even be in on him enough. And so Darren Waller is somebody that I've been on for a long time. Out of the combine, same sort of thing. We interviewed Greg Olson, their offense coordinator, and I said, and at this point, Jared Cook was still on the team. They didn't know if Jared Cook was coming back to the team. I said to Greg Olson, I said, give me a sleeper on your team. And he said, Darren Waller.
Nice.
He says, we think we have something special in this kid. He's like, I don't know what's going to happen with Jared. That's still being decided, but we think there's something special with this kid. We think we found something. So Darren Waller, 6'6", 255, ran a 4.40 at the combine, a converted wide receiver out of Georgia Tech. Like, he's but he is big. He is fast. Remember the Raiders last year, top 7 overall in terms of tight end targets and tight end red zone targets. Now, somebody could argue, well, that's because Jared Cook was all they had, but I also think that's somewhat of the offense and where Derek Carr is comfortable throwing the ball. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to take away stuff from Antonio Brown or even Tyrell Williams, but I think the Raiders' offense will be improved this year. Darren Waller is going to be the starting tight end on a team that has a lot of targets available, and he's not even being drafted. So
Yeah, nobody vacated more targets this offseason than the Raiders. Now they added players like Antonio Brown, which should account for a lot of them. But to your point, Darren Waller, athletic tight end, hard to find one of those.
It's New York Times bestselling author Matthew Berry with another self-serving, self-indulgent, all-about-me promo.
just want to give another shout out to the Fantasy Life app. I learned about the Josh Gordon news from the Fantasy Life app. Like, the alerts are absolutely crushing. If you don't believe me, why don't you take the word of, almost 800 users on iTunes that have all given us 4.8 stars. It's a great community for fantasy football in terms of, you can post polls and memes and GIFs, and you can comment on other people's. I highly recommend getting into a chat where you can get advice. And so it's a really fun community. If you like talking about fantasy football, if you listen to this podcast, I'm assuming you do, it's a great opportunity. But even if you don't, quote, go into the app, and I highly recommend you checking it out, and you can compete for prizes on our Compete tab. But even if you don't do any of those things, the alerts are worth it. Download the app. And I guess here's the best part. It's 100% free. Like, why wouldn't you try it out? Why wouldn't you try it out? Because it's like, if you hate it, just delete it. It's a free app.
Not 50% free.
No.
100% free.
Free. I always love it when people tweet at me saying, like, Barry, I heard you pimping this thing for so long. I finally broke down and got it, and now I don't understand how I lived without it. It's so awesome. Again, there's a reason why we're at 4.8 stars, and I think we're at like 4.85 or something.
Can we get that to 4.9? I'll round up for sure.
Right. Definitely. Anyway,
Field, you got to pull your review down.
FantasyLifeApp.com or wherever you get apps. It's in the Android and iOS App Store.
Couple of quick questions. And by the way, this Facebook stream that we're doing every day. Also, if you go to the ESPN Fantasy page, you can find videos on demand. We'll answering questions every single day. Good stuff there. Keith, what do you got for us?
And as long as you're on Facebook, follow my Facebook page, facebook.com/MatthewBerryTMR. Do you have a public Facebook page there, Stephania?
I do.
Yeah, where is it?
Stephania Bell.
Stephania Bell.
It's not crazy. Yeah.
We have fun. We have fun on my Facebook page. I answer some questions. Sometimes Thirsty Kyle goes in there and answers some questions.
Yeah. Nice. I like it. I'm more of a SoundCloud guy, but whatever.
I understand.
What do you got, Keith?
Yeah, we got some responses on.
I got minions.
We got some responses about the Tony Pollard take. So one person actually said they dropped Jamison Crowder for Pollard.
That was dumb. I'm just being honest.
But they're okay. Well, they're just saying.
I would not couch it that way because I think we don't know what his other wide receivers. Crowder was like his sixth wide receiver.
Okay,
if
fair
he has
enough.
Ezekiel Elliott, I like Crowder as a sleeper as well, but Crowder doesn't have the upside of Tony Pollard. Again, it's Zeke dependent.
Sure.
But there is a scenario here where Tony Pollard's a top 10 fantasy running back. There's absolutely a scenario this year for that. There is no scenario in which Jamison Crowder's a top 10 fantasy wide receiver.
Well, how about this? Here's the thing. I didn't even ask the question yet, but this is where it goes into it. So there's two questions, but one is from Tyler, is Pollard going to be this year's James Conner? And then the other one was from Malik saying, should I keep Kalen Ballage or go grab Pollard?
Oh, boy, Matthew.
I know why they asked that. Because they just wanted to see what you would do. Barrage, meanwhile, Kenyon Drake in a walking boot.
Here's what I would say to this.
Throw that out there.
What?
I said Kenyon Drake was in a walking boot. Kalen Ballage.
Believe me. You don't have to tell me. I have been in a Ballage à trois for much of the season. I would say in that particular case, it depends also on roster construction, right? I have Kalen Ballage ranked higher. So, just in a vacuum, I would say Kalen Ballage.
Okay.
Kalen Ballage has a much clearer path to consistent playing time than Tony Pollard, right? He has a much clearer path.
Yep.
Right now, he's the starting running back of the Miami Dolphins, and we don't know how long Kenyon Drake's going to be out, Stephania, but this ain't a great sign.
They're hopeful for week one.
They're hopeful for week one,
Yep.
but hopeful doesn't mean guaranteed. And by the way, even if Kenyon Drake is 100% healthy, all indications out of Miami is that this is going to be a time split, that it's going to be a 50-50 time split. So Kalen Ballage has a much more clear path to consistent fantasy relevancy and playing time than Tony Pollard does. Having said that, you'd rather have the starting running back of the Dallas Cowboys than the starting running back of the Miami Dolphins this year. And so there's a higher upside with Tony Pollard than Kalen Ballage. So it sort of depends on what you need this, if it's your 5th or 6th running back and it's just a YOLO upside pick, I'd say Tony Pollard. But if you need to use this guy during some bye weeks and something like that, give me Kalen Ballage. And I just say in a vacuum, I have Ballage ranked higher than Tony Pollard.
All right, let's bring
this year's James Conner.
He could be. It does seem like.
I really think that deal is going to get resolved. I'd be careful about getting too hopeful that Tony Pollard's all of a sudden going to.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just about to say to Stephania's point. I agree with that. I would say Austin Eckler, I think, has a better chance of being this year's James Conner than or Justin Jackson, one of those two guys, rather than Tony Pollard. But it's within the realm of possibility. And by the way, again, if Zeke were to get hurt, like I said, right. I'm on board with Tony Pollard being the handcuff you want to Ezekiel Elliott.
One more, Keith. What do you got for us?
Yeah, last one is just for Matthew. Dylan wants to know if you're selling draft boards again.
I've gotten this a lot, which I appreciate. Everyone loved the draft boards from last year. Unfortunately, we're not doing draft boards this year. It's a long, boring story, but basically the business, the company that built
a lot of those.
Yeah, I do. That's sort of on brand. The company that built the draft boards decided to get out of that business, and by the time they sort of told us that, it was too late in the season to get another vendor. So we're hopeful to have them next year. But I will say, if you go to fantasylife.com, we have all sorts of other draft-related gear that you can get, including we got trophies and T-shirts and tumblers and hats and everything to sort of set. There's cornhole board games. I mean, you name it.
Pretty good right there.
Who needs a draft board when you got a cornhole board game?
I'm just saying, promo code MB10 gets you 10% off fantasylife.com of anything in the store. So go check that out. Thank you, Dylan, for a question that was not planted. FYI, that was a legit question. Right? Not cool, Keith?
That is 100%
we
legit.
Didn't make Dylan up.
100% legit.
100% legit.
50%.
We are back
100%.
tomorrow previewing the Titans and the Colts. And then we head to the Big Apple, New York City, for our live show. Of course, talking about a lot of things there. Looking forward to seeing you all there at the Hard Rock. Is that right? Where are we going? Hard Rock? Hard Rock Cafe in Times Square. Looking forward to see you there. In the meantime, we'll talk to you guys soon, including on Facebook. Peace out.
You're in the 06010. Never gonna hustle in case you didn't know. Matthew Berry, TMR.
You guys go ahead, give me grief for being on SportsCenter for 45 seconds. I think you could do better than me because I don't think you could.
Jailbait, Field Yates.
You're terrible at hashtag improv. At Field Yates. At Field Yates.
Stephania Bell.
Oh, don't let Barry convert you.
Secret Squirrel, Daniel Dopp.
Make it happen.
Meet